Hey everyone, Javier here, and welcome back to the Harvest Family Podcast. I'm so excited you decided to join us here today. I'm excited because today is part 2 of my conversation with Marianne Connor, an expert on the Enneagram. We're talking about what it means to parent our personality, because when it comes to raising a child, it's all about how do we navigate our own personality so that we can parent at our best. So enjoy this conversation as Marianne gives practical tips based on your personality, how to best respond and parent your child. Enjoy.
That inside of them, not label them, but understand like, hey, when we're stressed, I get stressed too. This is how I handle it, and how can we help them develop that in their own life? So I love that. That's really good. And I know that for our parents, you kind of have some tips that you can put in place for each 9 different types on the Enneagram. Why don't we kind of like get into that practical nuts and bolts type of thing? Because I know for me, I love hearing that, like, hey, what are the things that I can do, right, to be a better parent? And that's kind of what we want to do. We want to equip and empower our parents here too. So why don't you kind of go through each type here and kind of give us like just some tips on what they should do in their parenting when those moments of stress or struggle, or maybe when they're just healthy, how they can live more to how God has designed them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to do that. First, I want to say that I don't think we covered this, but I want to make sure that the parents listening to this podcast understand that it's not okay to type your kids.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's right.
You want to give your child an opportunity to find their own type when they're appropriately in the right age demographic. I mean, that is fluid depending on who your child is, but I would say around, the age of 14 or something like that.
Okay.
And you know your child better than anyone else. But I think what happens is if you try to type your kids based on their behavior, then you're misguided. I'll go back to, I can't type you because I don't know why you're behaving that way. It could be a multitude of things. But if you know enough about the Enneagram to ask the right questions of your child, then you might be able to kind of have a better idea of 2 or 3 or 4 types that they could be landing in, rather than pigeonholing them into something. I heard a story of actually, let me tell you this story. I thought it was so funny. I was actually at an Enneagram workshop with my staff. It was being taught by someone else, and it was the first time our team had primarily even learned about the Enneagram and all the types. And there were several people in the room who were parents of young children. And I got about halfway through the workshop, I got a text from my friend Amy who said, "Oh my gosh, I just realized that my daughter's a 6." Well, her daughter's like 5 years old. And I was like, haha, that's funny. And she goes, "No, all these other people said their kids were 6s too." And so afterwards I had a chance to talk to her, and I said, if that's awesome, that you think she might have some attributes of the 6, because as we know, 6s like to ask a lot of questions. But I said, maybe what's really happening is your 5-year-old is just being a kid. Asking questions. 5-year-olds ask questions. So just because
I get that right now. I get that right now. My 3-year-old,
they're type 6, and so I just thought that was funny. And then you certainly don't want to start talking to your child about, all throughout their life. If you were to always tell your child, "Oh, you're a 1, you're a 1, you're a 1," well, then it may be that as they're growing up, they think they need to be a 1 or need to be more like a 1. When the truth is they're really a 3. And so, you just want to be careful of that.
That's good.
I'll just go back to the more you know about the 9 types and what's motivating each of those types, it gives you the opportunity to ask really good questions and just observe things in them.
And that's, I think you said the key there. It's not about classifications, it's about questions. How do you ask the right questions as you go through it? I think because we are quick to judge, we're quick to classify, and because but when you stop and ask the right questions, like you said, the Enneagram is about soul exploration. We want to explore, we want to be on this journey together. And because our souls and our personality, it's not a static black or white thing. It's gray. It's kind of like it's an art. It's like kind of like the dance, the fluidness of everything. So we can't just categorize and box people into that. I love that, Marianne.
You're
that is
so
really
good. by asking the right questions and holding their behaviors loosely, you really are engaging their hearts. And that's what it's about. That's what you want to
I
do.
never thought of it that way.
Hearts. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's such a key in parenting, right? We want to parent to the heart, of our kids, not just to their minds, to their behavior, but to their hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. We'll go ahead. Wow, there's so much to unpack there. I just process, but as you're doing that, like, why don't you go ahead and step into those tips? I know, I'm excited to hear these, and I'm taking notes right now. But why don't you get into these tips about for each Enneagram type?
Okay. I'm happy to do that. One thing I want you to keep in mind is that it is just human nature to parent our children to be like us. We parent our kids from our own type, and so we're tempted to teach them how to be a good or a better version of ourselves. And so then we project behavior based on what we felt as a kid in our own type. So that's something to keep in mind. But I thought it would be good if I could just kind of share with you, based on each type, what are the positive attributes of you in that type, or or how you might behave when you're in stress. And then I've got a couple of tips for each of the ones that will resonate with you in your core type. So we'll start with the type 1. I didn't say this earlier, but I'm actually a type 1. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this really resonated with me a lot, and hopefully it will be for some people out there who are type 1s. So type 1s actually do make great parents. All of our types make great parents when they're in their healthiest place.
That's good to hear.
1s will conduct themselves with the utmost integrity. They lead their kids by example, and they instill a strong sense of responsibility in their children, because that's what comes naturally to our type 1s. But when they're in stress, they can become overly critical, judgmental, controlling, or they may express anger in unskillful ways. And so I'm raising my hand saying, yes, all of those things have happened to me as I raised my kids. I cannot tell you how many times I've apologized to my adult children for my parenting mistakes. But thankfully they've had mercy and grace for me, and they turned out to be great kids in spite of me in my struggle.
And I can speak to that because I've met both of them and hung out with both of them, and they are great kids. So yes, you have done a great job raising them.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But here's some things that I wish I had known when I was raising them. One tip is that our type 1s should resist making snap judgments. In other words, don't reflexively point out the mistakes of your kids. That you should remember there is more than one way to do something. We don't want to make the kids feel inadequate at all. And as I was doing some of this research, I was just reminded of the home that I grew up in, a loving home, but some of these things actually happened from my parents, right? And so as a type 1, we can tend to make snap judgments. And so it's important to kind of practice the pause, take a breath. Don't point out the mistakes of your kids, even though you're trying to help. It can do a little bit more damage than you think. And so then a second tip would be to just learn from your kids. Let them teach you. Ask them their opinions and viewpoints with kindness and curiosity, because your way of seeing the world is not the only way to see it. There are 8 other ways. Remember, the 1 really believes that they are right, and they see very black and white. So it's important for our type 1 parents to let their kids teach you what their viewpoints are through their own lens.
And that's where the questions come into play. So that's really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really good.
So then a third tip would be to celebrate difference. Type 1 parents can assume that good parenting is the same as making their kids duplicates of themselves. Because remember, 1s are perfect and they're always right. So that's not good, but it can be good, but it's not good. So our calling is to create environments that lead to kids finding out who they truly are for themselves, and not to be little images of who we are.
Gotcha.
So one thing I wanted to just kind of throw out there as a visual representation of type 1 parenting is you can remember that in the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch, who we all love, played by Gregory Peck, he would be considered a really healthy type 1.
Okay.
But if you've seen the movie Mommy Dearest, which is the life biography of the actress Joan Crawford, then she would be the parent who would represent the unhealthy type 1.
Okay.
And so if you are a movie buff, you might want to go watch both those movies and look at it through the lens of type 1s.
Oh, that's good. That's great stuff, Marianne. Let's keep going here. Type 2s.
Okay. So type 2s have a God-given superpower, which is that they are able to sense and meet the needs of others in a wise and skillful way. Remember, they're our helpers, our befrienders. They're great at hospitality. They're very loving and flattering. As parents, when they are self-aware and healthy, they are nurturing and they're attuned to their children's feelings. They're great listeners and they're very approachable. But in stress, their superpower can also become their kryptonite, where their need to be needed can turn into a smothering or a helicopter parent who really finds their own identity in being needed by their children. They're proud of being needed by their children. And so some tips for a type 2 as a parent is that you should really work hard at setting boundaries for yourself and for them. We know that kids want clear boundaries. We know that 2s need to be needed, so they might be tempted to create an environment where they are needed, and that can give them turn into a tendency to overstep or meddle or hover. And that can turn into later, 18 years later, your children really struggle to launch into the world because you have just overparented them in that way. So setting boundaries for yourself is super healthy and for them as well.
Okay. That's really good. So I totally see that, in the type 2s, like in the parenting, that makes a lot of sense because I feel like I'm trying not to judge people, but I feel like I see a lot of that just personality come out, especially, just in a lot of more mothers type, just working in student ministry, kind of like that nurturing, you mentioned helicopter parenting is a very common term used in youth ministry circles, really to describe the parents that
absolutely
are great help, but also can be the headache at the same time. But if I can say
absolutely.
that, no, that's really good. Really good. Let's keep going.
Yeah. So a second tip would be to resist rescuing your child.
Okay.
Don't deprive them from developing their own coping strategies. You want failure to happen under controlled circumstances with a safety net provided. So you would want to teach your child how to self-soothe or how to, take care of themselves without you being there. And so you don't want them to believe that they can't do life without mom or dad. That's a problem. And we know that this kind of freedom and, giving them opportunities to fail is associated with what's age appropriate, right?
Gotcha.
You want them to be making age appropriate, just as they're pulling away from you and growing in their own, physical maturing and emotional maturing as well. So when I was growing up, my parents were super protective of me. I didn't get a lot of outside opportunities to flex those kind of muscles. And so when I went off to college, what do you think happened? I went crazy. I went crazy and I went rogue and I did a lot of things that and was involved with a lot of things that I should not have been involved with. But anyway, that was my story, kind of because I was so overprotected at home. And so then the last thing I think is super important for our type 2 parenting is that you definitely should invest in yourself outside of your children. This is especially hard for 2s. I have heard several women, incredibly, when I talk to them about self-care, the first thing they say is, "Isn't that selfish?" And that breaks my heart because it's not selfish. You need to take care of yourself because nobody else is going to do it. And it goes back to the whole, the emergency oxygen that falls from the ceiling in the airplane. Right? What is the first thing we learn? You must put that mask on yourself first.
Yes.
In order to have the wherewithal to take care of other people. And so by developing hobbies and interests and passions outside of yourself that does not include your kids, things that fill your bucket. It's so healthy for them to see that you have a sense of identity and self-worth apart from your relationship with them.
Yeah.
Um,
Man. Yeah.
It
I'm just
takes
thinking
the
through all the
pressure off.
conversations I've had with parents, even just pastors, about taking that time off for yourself, and people. Oh, that's freeing, Marianne, to hear that. That it's okay to take that time for yourself.
Hello, it's true for everyone. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what type you're in.
Yeah, no, that's so
right?
true.
There's only one of you, and if you're not taking care of you, then you're not going to be able to take care of anybody else. Even though that's what you want to do, you want to take care of everybody else, but that's not sustainable.
Yeah,
and it's not healthy. Even Christ.
Yeah.
Right? What did he do? He had to get away. He had to stop and hit the pause button.
Mm-hmm.
And so we should look to him as our example.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So what we got next is type 3.
Yes. Type 3. These guys and girls are, remember, achieving and performing. They're successful achievers. So when they are healthy, they're very dependable. They're motivating, optimistic, and they are full of ideas about how to have fun and fun things to do. They know how to get things accomplished and done. They're goal-oriented. They're driven. They can be competitive too. So anyway, but in stress, they can tend to work themselves too hard, which means they're not available. They may become too image conscious, or they may be distracted by their list, that they've made. So a good practice for a type 3 would to learn intentional listening. I've talked to several type 3s who have said, they have caught themselves seeing their children as little projects instead of little people. And
that's not good.
No, but if you're a 3 out there, you might resonate with that a little bit. Because you're constantly thinking about what's next, how do I get to the next thing? And so that creates people who are not super great listeners, and that's because they're mentally multitasking.
Okay.
And I think it's important to remember that kids can tell when you're not present.
That's true. Very true.
Yes. And so then they might start believing that they mean less to you than your work or your list or whatever it is. I think it's important to remember that there's a big difference between hearing someone and listening to someone. So type 3s, I think, can increase their listening skills. So a second tip would be to let your kids accomplish their tasks in their own way. Type 3 parents sometimes they're tempted to tell kids how to do something more efficiently or quicker or a better way, maybe a better way to clean their room or a more efficient way to clean the room. And so it's important to, know that your kids require, most of all, for you to love them for who they are, and not by spending your time trying to correct them or make them better.
Gotcha.
And then the last tip for this would be to fully feel and share your feelings, because 3s are deceiving themselves. They don't do a great job of really experiencing emotions or feelings. In fact, they've been known to say that feelings get in the way. Feelings keep projects from getting completed. And so it's important for them to identify their own feelings and to be able to express their love for their children through their feelings and their emotions, even down to practice hugging them just because, not because they've done something to earn a hug, but just randomly hugging them and showing them some physical affection, and that sort of thing. So
Gotcha.
Yeah. Any questions about that?
No, I'm just processing. I loved what you said there about we can make them our own projects, because I definitely see that sometimes where it's almost like we tie the success of our kids. I'll just use athletics, for example. If my kid is more successful at, playing their sport, then that means I'm going to be a better parent, as well.
Absolutely.
So I definitely see that. Yeah.
You hit the nail right on the head. That is a huge temptation. And so that makes parents drive their kids and really push their kids toward being the straight A student and best on the baseball field and you know, the best in the symphony. And so these sorts of parents want to have the bumper sticker on the back of their car about how many years or semesters has their child been in the honor roll.
You know, I was just thinking that exact thing. You know, that's probably every type 3 out there, right? Has that bumper sticker, you know, for their kid. I actually had that exact image come into my mind.
Because when their kids are excellent and perfect and, you know, achieving, that means they are.
Yeah.
And so you have to really watch that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Let's get to type 4s. Yeah.
So type 4s are our romantic individualists. These people are highly creative. They find beauty in everything. I'm so grateful for them because they make our world a more beautiful place. They're authentic and they are compassionate and they're creative. Like I said, they are really good at helping kids get in touch with their feelings. Our 4s are intuitive about what's going on in our kids' hearts and can really model an appreciation for beauty and the finer things. But in stress, our 4s can become more self-indulgent or moody or emotionally demanding, or sometimes even self-absorbed. So I think a good tip for a type 4 is, because remember I was saying earlier that they really feel like there's something missing inside of themselves. So that's a lie that the enemy tells us, by the way. There's nothing missing, but that's the struggle that the 4 has. And so as a parent, it's important for you to not focus on what is missing and to stop comparing the way you parent with other families. It's easy to watch other families and think they have it all together and look how perfect they are and blah, blah, blah. And so you don't want to be focusing on what's missing even in your relationship with your kids, because remember, your kid might not be your own type. In fact, there's a great possibility that they're not your own type. And so be careful about focusing on what's missing. And then a second tip would be not to take things personally. Our type 4s can be overly sensitive, and sometimes they read things into words or behaviors that aren't there at all. And so it's important to not take things personally. And then this last one I thought was interesting. We haven't even talked about orientation to time. That's a whole nother podcast. But our 4s' orientation to time is of the past. And so they really are, they allow what has happened in the past to really inform what they're feeling and experiencing today. A little bit out of balance in that regard. And so as a type 4, you know, all of it is about guiding the next generation. But for 4s, it's guiding the next generation and giving yourself space to forgive the last generation. In other words, looking at your own parents and forgiving them for whatever you felt like they did not provide for you that is missing.
Gotcha.
So,
that personal one, like not taking things personal, that can be so key, because I especially think when, you know, your kids move on to the teenage years where they start to really blame you for things, or they purposely try to rebel against you, right? Definitely don't take things personal. That's a really good tip there. I like that. That one resonated to me the most out of all the ones you listed there.
Really? Yeah. I remember when my kids were preteens or teens and we'd get into a struggle or a fight or something, and my kids would say, I hate you, you know? And I would say, that's okay. I you know what? I do not believe that you really hate me. So you just need to know that that's okay that you're feeling that, but I love you and I know that you love me too.
That's good. That's good.
So anyway, let's move on to our type 5s. Remember, they are the investigative observers. And just as a reminder, they struggle with accessing their feelings and their emotions. They're very much in their head. And they are also the ones that are running on a low battery. And so they're hoarding their things that might come more naturally to other parents. And so, but when a type 5 is healthy, they are balanced, cool, and they're calm in a family crisis. And they are objective sources of wisdom and counsel for their kids, because our 5s are so knowledgeable and so wise. It's really true. they know how to do that and walk through wisdom with their families. But when they're in stress, they can be detached or preoccupied. They can become uncompromising, or even impractical.
Okay.
And so a good tip or a practice for our type 5 is to practice making an emotional connection with your kids. Remember, this doesn't come naturally to them.
Yeah.
So adult children of 5s, they do express sadness that they never made an emotional connection with their 5 parent. The message the kids receive is that you're not interested in them, or your children may feel rejected when you're unable to connect with them emotionally. So in order to avoid this, you would want to just really work hard to push yourself to express your feelings as they can come up. So maybe daily offer a verbal or a physical expression of love, because your distance and your privacy can be misinterpreted. Our 5s do like to withdraw. They need more time to be alone and have that time of privacy. But if you're not careful, that ends up being what your kids remember about you. So you need to really make a daily sacrifice to say something verbally encouraging or a physical expression of love for them.
Yeah.
And then that goes to number 2, which is be present. And of course, I would say this to everyone: being present is absolutely a godly attribute. God is with us here today. And we know he was with us in our past and in our future, but he is working with us and changing us as he's in our present, not in our future. So it's super important for the 5s be present, because they can lapse into this observing rather than participating kind of behavior. And so they need to be asking themselves, am I emotionally and physically present right now? Or have I retreated into my thinking and into my mind?
Gotcha.
Otherwise, you're going to miss childhood, all the fun stuff in childhood. And so then,
well, they say like, don't blink, you'll miss it, right?
It's so true, man. It's so true. And so then 3 would be to be spontaneous. Even though our 5s do not like surprises, let me just tell you this: they do not like surprises.
Interesting.
It's okay to be spontaneous, and I think there's ways to have planned spontaneity in your routine. Maybe the kids don't need to know it's planned, but do something that's kind of off the normal rigid routine that you do. And so we know that kids love spontaneous activities like a game or an adventure or something like that. So anyway, that would be fun.
That's good.
One thing I want to say about your children who might be a type 5 is 2 things I want to say about this. If you have a child who's a type 5, putting them in timeout or sending them to their room is not punishment. It's kind of like good, like they love it. Because type 5s really like to withdraw and be alone. It's because there's so much in their head, they want to be alone in their thoughts. And so I'm just throwing that out there. If you have a child who's a type 5, they love it when they get put in timeout.
Now, Marianne, because with that too, because you did tell us not to type our kids.
I know.
So kind of like, connect the dots there. So don't type the kids, but recognize that they're type 5. It's time. So is that like, so like, what are you trying to tell us there, in that regard?
I'm telling you that every child is motivated by something different. And if your child is motivated by being put in timeout, if it changes their behavior, or if it doesn't change their behavior, if it doesn't get you where you want it to go, then you might go, they like this just a little bit too much. It's not my evil plan is not working.
Yes, I gotcha. No, that's good. That's good.
And then also, just in light of the COVID stuff that we've been going through, just keep in mind, if you have a child who might be a type 5, keep in mind that you've had a lot of family time and a lot of everybody being home all the time, which can be a little bit overwhelming for your type 5 child. They might need some space and some privacy. to kind of get away, or those opportunities to kind of get away and be alone. That you should not take that personally, that they don't like being with the family. It's not that they don't like the family time. It's that they have got to recharge and re-energize. And the way they do that is by being quiet and being alone.
Gotcha. That's good.
So hopefully that's helpful for
you.
All right, let's move on to our type 6. Remember, our type 6s are our loyal guardians. They're called this because they're extremely loyal. Once they understand that they can trust you, they are your friends for life, and they are devoted to their marriages, all of their relationships. They're devoted to their community groups, everything. They're extremely reliable. They're practical, down to earth, always prepared. They're detail oriented. Children who have loyalist 6 parents feel secure and harbored because their parents have created a home environment that allows that.
Gotcha.
But when they are not healthy, when they're lacking self-awareness, some of these admirable qualities can become overshadowed by unhelpful behavior patterns. So they can become self-doubting or alarmist. They can procrastinate, or they can hover over their kids out of fear for their child's safety and well-being. And so we don't want that. And so that leads us to our first tip, which is that you should remember as a 6 that fear is contagious. We don't want to project our own feelings and fears to our children. We don't want to project that. So it's important for a type 6 parent to be sure to rein in that anxiety to prevent it from spreading to them. You want your kids to believe and know that they are in good hands, and of course that we rely and trust our loving Father, God, who protects us all.
Gotcha. That's good.
So type 6 may be tempted to make a lot of rules, and may be tempted to have a very rigid, rule-centered, home life. So it's important for a type 6 parent to be careful not to do that. You want to avoid making too many rules. Or you want to avoid too much structure. You don't want your child to rebel against authority and structure, because they may not be a type 6. And so if they're a type 6, they might like that, and they might really respond well to that. But if they are all of the other 8 types, then they may rebel against it. So there's a fine line, you gotta, I think balance is important. And then the last one is to resist the temptation to, I call either to catastrophize or to awfulize.
Okay.
So
I feel like you just coined those terms right there.
I did not. I borrowed them from Ian Morgan Cron, and also from Beth McCord, who you're going to hear about as a resource in the end. But, anxiety is about, the difference between anxiety and fear is that anxiety is a feeling about a perceived threat rather than a real threat. And because our 6s live in this higher, heightened sense of anxiety, they are constantly fearful of a perceived threat. And so that can make our children feel, out of balance and out of sorts. And it can eventually, if you become the one that is catastrophizing and awfulizing everything that really isn't a threat, then your children can begin to see you as maybe crying wolf, and then they minimize it when there are real crisis happening.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah,
that's really good.
So I think for a 6, it's super important to trust yourself and really do that work to begin trusting yourself, knowing that you're a good parent and that you do have the right resources to be a good parent.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Okay,
let's keep moving on here. Type 7. These are the fun parents, 7. Right?
What's that?
These are supposed to be the fun parents, right?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Fun. I have so many stories. I happen to be married to a 7, and we won't go into all the parenting stories about him being a 7 dad. But anyway, I will tell you that our 7 parents, remember, they are the optimistic enthusiasts. They want to have fun under all circumstances, and they always see the silver lining, and they're always coming up with stories and adventures and fun things. So they're spontaneous, they're imaginative, they're creative, energetic, optimistic, And they are great entertainers who love to captivate you for hours with stories of their own adventures or creating adventures for themselves or their families. And so when they're in, the thing is, when they are unhealthy, they obviously have blind spots that can undermine their effectiveness as parents. And so again, it goes back to not allowing you to feel pain, pushing past the pain, pretending like the reality is not reality, and that sort of thing. So sevens as parents should really work hard at being reliable.
Okay.
Because sevens have racing minds and they're distracted, they tend to overcommit or lose track of time.
Okay.
Sometimes they show up late, or they make promises to their kids and they don't follow through with them. You certainly do not want your children to think you are flaky. So you really want to slow down, keep tabs on your schedule, setting reminders, and just know that kids need to know that they can depend on you, and that you should not make casual promises that you don't intend to follow through with.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So then a second tip would be to be mindful of the moment. This goes back to being present, practicing being present. Because of your energy as a seven, you might be overwhelming your kids who aren't sevens themselves. You want to be present and aware of what's happening in the moment. So you need to be asking you need to be asking yourself these questions like, do I need to listen more or talk less right now with my child?
Gotcha.
Or do I need to tap the brakes on my energy in order to give my kids the spotlight?
Yeah.
Or do I need to sit with my kids with their pain rather than finding the silver lining and rushing them out of it?
Yeah, that's good.
Those are difficult to do, but they're great moments of parenting and really good practices for our seven parents. And then the third tip would be that you should definitely be the authority. God has put you in the authority position with your children, and you should be that in a loving and kind way. Our sevens' natural leadership style is to flatten hierarchies in order to make everybody equal. And so they really struggle with being the bad cop. They never want to be the bad cop. They want to be the good cop. They want to be the fun one. And so they don't want to be the disciplinarian. And sometimes they may expect the other parent to take on that role because they just repel against being that. But remember that no kid wants to feel like no one is in charge. That just makes more anxiety for them. So our sevens need to learn how to lean into that with kindness and purpose.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. Yeah. So we go from the type 7, which was a fun optimist, to type 8, which are the boss. I remember that. So I'm feeling this one might be a little opposites here.
Well, possibly. I mean, you know, so our type 8s, remember, are the challengers. They are intense. They're high energy. They're energetic fireballs who are always on the move, actually. And so when they're healthy, they are protective and they're empowering, and they can lead with kindness and humor and clarity. They know how to get things done, and they are natural leaders, obviously. However, when they're in autopilot or when they're not healthy, they can become impatient or blind to and insensitive to their kids' feelings. And they can occasionally be explosive, because our type 8s are in the anger triad, which again is a whole nother conversation. Anger to them is just right at the surface. It's ready to come out, boom, 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 boom. And then they move on. Whereas, other types, they may feel like, wow, why'd you just yell at me? And the type 8 would, well, I'm not yelling at you. I'm just passionate. And so
I laugh because I've said that many times in my life.
Oh, really?
Say that to my wife. I'm not upset. I'm just being passionate right now. Yes. So, oh my gosh, you just labeled me right there, Marianne. Wow.
Yeah, as a type 8, you want to be careful of that. You need to be able to see how your behavior affects other people. Maybe bring it down just a notch or two in order to be kind and know that not everyone is as passionate as you are. So a few tips for our 8s, again, going back to practicing the pause. Again, I believe this is important for all of us, but just learning to stop and count to 10 before you kind of shoot off. And I heard somebody, instead of shooting from the hip, I end up shooting from the lip. And so as a type A, you just want to be careful that you're not shooting from the lip, just as they're in a reactive way. But you just want to pause, count to 10, take a minute, and maybe restructure what you were going to say or how you were going to react. And then our type 8s are doers, and they have great gusto for life. So as a parent, you might need to tone it down a little bit or dial it back a little bit.
Okay.
Because our type 8s are naturally big and powerful, and they take up the room. They take up the space in the room when they walk in, you know?
Yeah.
But some children may retract from this because they themselves are not 8s.
Yeah.
And so your energy could actually exhaust your kids if you're not careful, or if it's not being exuded in a healthy way.
Oh,
it's important to that's something to be aware of, you know?
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing for our 8s is to own up to your part. And of course, I believe this for all of us. We should all model and practice humility with our children. You touched on it earlier.
Yeah.
To take responsibility for your mistakes and to actually say out loud, I am sorry. I was wrong. Will you forgive me? I think my generation growing up, we were not parented that way. It was a very authoritative, kind of parenting style. But it's just a beautiful thing when you can model that to your children, and you can say what you're doing is you're teaching them that you're human too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And that you're not perfect.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's really good. I mean, I can go more into that. I'm pretty confident that's me. You know, I've been learning a lot about myself in this conversation. So with that too, we got the last one. So we'll bring it in to the finish line with type 9s.
We're bringing it in. Again, I'll remind you that our type 9s are our peacemakers, or also known as peaceful mediators. Again, they have the ability to understand and resonate with all of the 9 types. So if you're listening to this podcast and you've heard me go through all these types and you're like, well, that could be me, that could be me, that could be me, that could be me. It may be that you're actually a type 9. And so that has to do with their wanting to merge with other people and their ability to see, to hear all sides of the story.
Gotcha.
So they make fabulous moderators and mediators because of that. And they're everybody's friend. And so anyway, I could go on and on about 9s because I love my daughter's a 9. Okay, so as parents, when they're healthy and self-aware, they are easygoing, unselfish, great listeners. They're generous, supportive, and they see and value every family member's perspective, like I was saying earlier. But when they're unhealthy, they are absolutely asleep to their own lives. They can be conflict avoidant, stubborn, disengaged, and they certainly are in denial about their own anger. And sometimes they can tend to be overly permissive with their children, and that would be because they want to create harmony and keep harmony.
Gotcha.
So absolutely, the number one tip would say, don't merge with the lives of your kids. You know, and that includes their own agendas and their own pursuits. Don't merge, don't go there. You know, give your children opportunities to participate in lots of activities and all that sort of thing. But just, you know, that's for them, and you need to find your own things that you're passionate about. And so then the second tip would be to avoid being too lenient with them, by not being clear of your expectations or being too easygoing with them when they make a mistake. You actually are creating confusion.
Gotcha.
You know, kids love clear boundaries, and you should be building those healthy, strong boundaries. It will make them feel safer. But your tendency as a 9, in order to avoid conflict, is to not be clear. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so then the last tip would be to not take it personally when your kids don't listen to you. Remember, our 9s, their lie that they believe about themselves is that their voice doesn't matter, and that they don't matter, and that their needs and their wants and desires don't matter, that everybody else's opinion is more important than their own. And so, you know, when we're raising our kids, they're not listening to us, right? So as a 9 parent, don't take that personally, and don't hear it as that lie that the enemy wants you to believe about yourself, is that you don't matter. And just remember that they're just kids. All kids are doing that to all their parents.
Yeah, that's true.
And just, I think a good thing for a 9 parent to remember is that no, when you say no, it doesn't mean the same thing as I don't love you. It's okay to say no, right?
Wow, that's powerful right
And
there.
actually no can mean that I love you.
Yes.
So
that's really good. Marianne, that is just phenomenal stuff. Wow. Like that is so good. So much to unpack there. And I know that as we kind of finish up, you do have some resources that if any of this struck you, hopefully it all, got to you, at least one type, got to you right here. What are some, resources people go to if they want to explore the Enneagram more, if they want to have further conversation maybe with you, because you are our coach at this. So what's like some books and resources and a way they can connect with you personally?
Yes, absolutely. So if you are new to the Enneagram, I would strongly suggest that you either purchase the book, The Road Back to You, written by Ian Morgan Cron and Suzanne Stabile. You can find it on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. You can listen to it on Kindle. I love that book because it really is a primer. The author would say it's a primer. It's a easy, simple, quick way to learn the basics around the Enneagram. And really, you don't even have to read the whole book first to find your own type. The way they've set it up is the first page of each chapter has a list of characteristics associated with that type. And you can go in there and check off which ones resonate with you. And, if you find the one, which I did, when I read the page about the type 1, I wept.
Oh, wow.
Because I felt seen and known. And I felt like I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
So it was just a beautiful cathartic moment for me. And it really started my journey on this. And so it's been really good. The Road Back to You. It's a great book.
That
Ian
is a
Morgan
great book.
Cron also has a podcast. If you listen to podcasts, he does a great job. The name of the podcast is called Typology.
Okay.
You can find that on Spotify and all the things. He actually just started a YouTube channel, and he's doing 6 or 7 minute videos on different topics, and he just finished his one on parenting. So some of what you heard me talk about today came from that, and so you might want to go back and look at that. The other Enneagram resource I would send you to with respect to finding your own type and learning more about the Enneagram would be a website called yourenneagramcoach.com. And this is Beth McCord, who really that's where I have my certification from. She is all about the gospel and about the truth of the gospel and how you can connect it to the Enneagram and learn more about yourself through that. If you are somebody that is interested in learning more about either finding your type and you need and desire somebody to talk it through with, I certainly would love to have that conversation with you. You can reach me at my website, which is pathwaystoyou.com, or Marianne at pathwaystoyou.com. And so I would love to hear from you. If you just enjoyed, this podcast, but I do all kinds of things with that. I do one-on-one coaching. I do typing sessions, which is just usually a 1-hour conversation, which helps you really hone down and give you the confidence of what type you believe you are. But I'm also doing teaching. I'm teaching, curriculum. I'm doing retreats. I'm doing half-day trainings and all that sorts of things as well. So anyway, reach out to me for that. There are a couple of books that I read when I was raising my children that are not Enneagram books, but they're great parenting books. These came out really before the Enneagram kind of got really popular. And I can just mention those to you real quick. Dan Webster wrote a book called Kid Unique.
Okay, I've heard that one. Heard Dan Webster,
Kid Unique, helping kids discover who they are. And he does a great job with a workbook and all that sort of thing. And then Dan Allender wrote How Children Raise Parents, The Art of Listening to Your Family.
Yeah, that's great.
So anyway,
That's
those are
good.
some good resources to get you started.
Those are good. Yeah, that's a great place to start, Marianne. Well, thank you so much for joining us here. What a great episode. Just a lot of good stuff here. And all the things, all the resources and things that Marianne described will be in the descriptions to this video or podcast episodes. Make sure you guys click on those links and check those out. Well, Marianne, it was so great to have you here today.
Thank you.
Greetings from Florida. We miss you. I know I miss you guys
Yeah.
back in Dallas, but hopefully we get to see each other soon.
I hope so, Hobby. I miss you guys, and you're an incredible leader, an incredible pastor. I'm just so glad that you are doing what you're doing. So your families are very fortunate to have you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll talk to you later.
Okay, thanks. Bye.